I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All the Mods 10. So today is fission reactor day. Well, sort of. We actually just need to get the fuel for our fission reactor up and running today, because I think that we won't be able to fit everything all in one episode. So last episode, we played around with the thermal evaporation towers, and we got ourselves some lithium so I can make a handy dandy tool. But today is going to be a little bit more complicated. Just bear in mind, I'm going to try my best to explain everything to my best ability, as I do learn new tips and tricks every playthrough. So this might actually be one of my best setups thus far for Fissile Fuel. And if you've potentially seen some of my other modular Fissile Fuel production setups, you're probably going to love this video. Now, along with this Fissile Fuel setup, we're also going to be setting up the plastic. Yes, HDPE sheets, as they are called, which we're also going to need down the road to be able to make SPS casings. So we might as well wrap all of this in one episode. Now, just a fair warning for this: if you do not already have yourself an infusion factory setup where you have all of this automated, you're probably going to want to get that set up, because it is going to be required to move forward in this Fissile Fuel production. All of the machines that we're going to need for this are going to require top tier alloys and many other components that are required via the wonderful infusion factory. Now, to start this bad boy off, let's work on the HDPE sheets first. Now, inside of this barrel here is going to contain some of the machines that we are going to need. So we are going to need some electrolytic separators. This is actually just going to be me producing hydrogen and oxygen, which is also going to be needed for other setups. So I do want to set two up just plain Jane for that, but I also want an electrolytic setup basically to make the HDPE sheets. So as of right now, we need an electrolytic separator, a crusher. We're going to need, I believe, 2 PRCs, and we're also going to need a chemical tank and a rotary condensator for this setup. Now, what's really going to make this all possible, believe it or not, is the extractor, because the extractor has the ability for us to produce biofuel quite easily, because we can make moss indefinitely with the extractor with this simple recipe. And the cool part is it can actually auto inject directly into our crusher. So now let's go ahead and set this bad boy up. So over here, I'm going to face this direction and place down my electrolytic separator. And that's because this will auto eject hydrogen to the left side of it, and the right side will auto eject by default the oxygen. So this actually works out really well if we place down a PRC, which is going to need hydrogen in here for our production of substrate, which is actually what we're going towards right now. So we'll be getting hydrogen, but we do have to provide this some water, which we can actually provide it through the back using our applied energetics system, right? We have infinite water, so we might as well use it. And if we're also going to send water into here, might as well also send it into our electrolytic separator. And so with an exporter on the back filtered to water, you can now see hydrogen filling up and water. And I do want to get some power put on these. We'll worry about that here in a second, though. Now, this next part, we are going to need a crusher setup, and I can place my crusher down right next to the PRC. And inside of the crusher, we are going to have to change a few configs. So I might as well clear them and make sure that the PRC is set to an output, and we're going to auto eject, and the bottom is set to an input. And that bottom's important, that the bottom is the input, because this is where we are going to set up our extractor, which is going to constantly produce moss blocks. This is pretty interesting, right? And honestly, such an easy way to automate this process. So with stone directly under the extractor, a bone block there, and then moss blocks on all 4 sides, that should kick on, and it's going to start automatically sending moss in here. And this is going to produce our biofuel. Now, by default, our pressurized reaction chamber is not set up to start receiving items from the right-hand side. So this is where we need to go into the config, and I recommend just going ahead and clearing this because we're going to have to worry about a couple different things. We're going to have to worry about our item input, which is going to automatically be accepted here, but our output, which is kind of important, right? And I think we're going to output to the bottom, and we'll make sure to turn auto output on. And what it's going to output is this substrate. But now we also have to worry about another byproduct, which is the ethylene. And we need to use this ethylene and send it somewhere else. So if we go under our chemicals section, let's just go ahead and clear this. We want to make sure, though, that, let's see, everything here, is just clear, because we are going to be inputting from the right hand or from the left hand side, and we're going to be outputting to the top on that ethylene. So output is to the top. It's blue. You can see right here. and I just want to send that directly into a chemical tank. And this chemical tank is, believe it or not, quite important, because if this does fill up, which it will start to produce in excess, we want to make sure that it actually dumps said excess, which is kind of like super important for this setup. So then that leads us to this next setup, which is the PRC. And we're going to notice right off the bat that it needs liquid ethylene, not regular ethylene. So this is where there is a new sort of thing that we're going to have to worry about, right? We're going to have to worry about condensating our gas ethylene into a liquid, and we'll use a rotary condensator for that, and we can place that right next to here. I recommend going into the configs here for this, and let's see, we can go ahead and change the chemical settings to make sure that the input is on the right, and what we can do is just set the output to the right here. And the cool part about using this chemical tank is it also works like a pipe, right? So we are inputting from all sides, but we can go ahead and we can tell this, hey, automatically output to the right hand side. And it will automatically output, and we are now producing liquid ethylene. And so now here we go into the final thing, the PRC. So we need to take in fluids. We're not worried about chemicals in this, and our items are kind of important. We actually want to input the items from the top, and then we're going to auto output the items and send those to the right of the machine. As far as the inputs of fluids, yeah, we just kind of want the inputs to look like this. I think this is going to be more than fine, and we don't even have to really modify that. And that's cool because we can just use a regular fluid pipe, a mechanical pipe from Mechanism, and that should then take that ethylene that's in liquid form and send it right here. Now, we still have to feed this into the back, one of the fluids, or the gases from here, which is going to be oxygen. So we can actually route a pipe that can run down, or we can actually use a chemical like card technically from AE. But you know what? I think I'm going to go about it a really goofy way, essentially. What I'm going to do right here is I'm actually going to route a chemical pipe that's going to run all the way around. And then I'm going to go ahead and route my logistical transporter all the way down like this. This may seem kind of goofy, and I will admit this is kind of goofy, but it's actually going to be covered up, which is something to kind of note. So the items are basically going to be routed here, and they're going to get automatically sent into this chamber. And you know what? Just to make this a little bit cleaner, I'm going to actually route this back here. And this is going to give me the ability to pull a cable directly from underneath. I do, however, need to go into this config, and I do want to make sure my gas is here on the output, which is typically set to right. I'm going to actually remove that, and I'm going to make the bottom output 2. And that is going to send oxygen down. Now, inside this electrolytic separator, I recommend you have dumping excess set up, preferably probably on both. That way it will constantly run, but I don't know if we're going to have to worry about that. But yeah, I just need to bring this all the way around, and I'm going to route this into the back here. And honestly, once this is connected, this should start working. And I think we can go ahead and just set up a dimensional chest that goes right here. However, I do want to make sure that on this cable right here, it is not set up to receive items, just to make sure we don't accidentally start sending random stuff into there. But there we go. Perfect. So that is now set up, and this should automatically send, just like we configured, to the output on the right. And that means that this will produce some sheets for us. We do, however, need to give everything power though. And just like that, beautiful. And let's see, is this actually functioning? Yes, everything is working, and we shouldn't have to worry about our ethylene building up or anything like that. Everything is just going to keep producing, and it's going to start producing those HDPE pellets. And I do want to store them in pellet form so that way we can use them later on. So they're just going to end up in the drawer network, and we now have a consistent supply. And by the way, whenever I want to turn them into HDPE sheets, I can just toss them into my enrichment chamber with this recipe. And a simple boop, and there we go. So now let's go ahead and set up these electrolytic separators. And what I want to do is I want to use an interface on the top of both of these. They're both going to automatically be configured the way they are. Nothing really has to happen except for an exporter in the back of both of them that's just simply supplying water. Since we have unlimited amounts of it, we can send it right back in here. So water is going to go in like so. And then on the sides, I want to use tubes like this. And that is just going to send right into the interface. Now, before I hook this up, I do want to do a couple of things because we're sending this chemical into our applied energetics system. And this is actually capable and thanks to applied mechanistics. And this comes in the form of a couple of chemical cells. And I went ahead and made two 64K chemical cells. And what I want to do before doing anything with this is go into my cell workbench, and I want to configure this for oxygen and hydrogen. And I essentially want one for each. Now, make sure you don't put liquid hydrogen in here. It should only accept like regular, like this, for example, is oxygen, but you don't want the liquid form. But yes, you're going to want to format both for this. You can see right here. And I don't know if this can accept overflow destruction cards. It says it can. I would assume that it can. I think this incompatible with cell is actually kind of a talking about it cannot go inside of the filter. But yes, overflow destruction cards we could potentially use in the future for things like this. But perfect. My goal though is to have those machines technically shut off, so I don't need an overflow for this. And we can just toss it inside of our drive. And there is nowhere technically for this to go outside of filling this buffer up. So once we turn this on, it should just start working as you would expect. So that's going to go on. And then over here, we fill that. And then we just put a gate on it and we call it a day. And there we go. So now we have ourselves hydrogen and oxygen at our disposal at any time. And I just need to add some speed upgrades on these and we'll be producing way more than we're probably ever going to use. Oh, and also don't forget to connect your cable up to your system. Yeah, I forgot about that. All right, but here we go. So we can now see our chemical storage working. So now with that out of the way, it's time to whip out the big guns, and that is going to be fissile fuel production. And this can be confusing if you're looking at it from just within JEI. But if you go ahead and search fissile fuel, you should be able to find yourself a wiki page. And it looks a little bit like this. And on this wiki page for fissile fuel, you're going to find yourself a little tree. Now, I would not worry too much about this, but what's super important is this detailed production chain that is listed down here. And you'll notice it is broken down into 3 separate parts. And this is what makes this setup, honestly, pretty straightforward. Now, I could go about it doing it with this setup that you see right here, but I think I want to show you a much cleaner and scalable solution. And so breaking it down into 3 individual parts is the way that I would like to do this. So we have one part that is going to essentially be sulfur processing. Then we're going to have another part, which is going to be processing uranium. So if I grab some uranium, we can go ahead and actually put that in this slot. This is going to be the uranium processing. And then finally is combining these 2 processes into one, which will ultimately land us in the isotropic centrifuge. So first things first, we'll go on the left side. We will start with a chemical oxidizer. Then we'll go with a chemical infuser, another chemical infuser, and then finally we'll end up with a rotary condensator. Now on the right-hand side, we're simply going to have an enrichment chamber and a chemical oxidizer. And then finally, where everything sort of combines, we'll simply have a chemical dissolution chamber, a chemical infuser, and an isotropic centrifuge, which will ultimately be producing our final product. Now this left side is for producing sulfuric acid, so we need to get our basic components and start chaining them. It's going to basically go from left to right into this machine, which is going to ultimately produce the final product. And then we also have a product that needs to go into this machine, which is going to be steam. So the main thing we need to input into our chemical oxidizer is going to be sulfur. And we're going to want to make sure we have this like constant supply, in which we currently do, and we may need to upgrade it as we go. But for right now, sulfur goes in here. And then it's just a matter of setting up the configs in each of these machines and making sure we're handling our gases and our fluids correctly. Now, the configuration of these machines are some of the most tedious parts of doing this whole setup. But let me kind of explain an easy way to think about this. Chemical oxidizer produces a gas, and most of the gases will stay a gas unless it goes into a condensator and then we condensatrate it. So if it is a gas when it starts, it's going to continue through all processes as a gas. So it makes the configuration of these machines kind of easy. This is going to be producing a chemical as described in here. So inside of our chemicals tab, we want to make sure that the auto output is set to on and to the right, and by default this machine is, and that means it's going to go into this machine, which we want to make sure that our input is on the left, making sure it's set up. And most of these machines are set up this way. However, we are sometimes going to have 2 chemicals that are going to be required, or a fluid and a gas, in order to produce something. For example, our next setup, which requires sulfur dioxide and oxygen. So we're going to have to change the secondary input. And so we can leave the right as a primary, but our back, we probably want to change that to the back of the machine. So I can use a exporter to give it that gas. And thankfully, we can do all this with AE. So it's really, really nice. Remember that oxygen that we set up? Well, now we can access it, right? And this is why I wanted to use applied mekanistics. By dragging this in, it should allow us to mix those two chemicals, being this one, which is directly coming into this system. And then we need to make sure, like our output, which I'm almost positive this is an auto output, right? No, auto output's to the front. So we want to turn that off, and we want to make sure our auto output is to the right, because we're just going to send it down the next chain of machines. And then so on and so forth, right? We got to go back into this one and make sure the input is correct, and make sure the input is correct on this side, in which it is. So let's talk about the rotary condensator, right? We've done a lot of condensating so far. This is just going to receive water, and we are going to convert this, and we're going to send it to the back, which by default, the fluids should be accepting from all sides. Let's just go ahead and clear the fluids, and we'll say, hey, make sure the input is from the back. And then this is going to be under condensating mode. And so that means we're taking our water and converting it into steam. Actually, no, this needs to be decondensating, I do believe, actually. Yes, for this, we are going to want steam, right? So this needs to be decondensating. So yeah, taking fluid from the back and then producing gas, which is going to be output to the left. So that way we can just simply attach cables. And this is going to allow us to scale these machines up when we want to scale up. Because yes, you can have these machines directly attached to each other, but if you do that, scaling up your infrastructure may become hard, because believe it or not, we're going to need more than just one chemical oxidizer. So I could just simply stack another chemical oxidizer on top of each other, and then I can run a tube. And then I can run a tube up here and continue up for as high as we need. Speaking of tubes, we should now be able to just simply lay out some tubes and then start connecting up our applied energetics system. And once we do this, things are going to start being sent in, including items. I do believe we have sulfur. If not, I'm going to have to get the autocraft set up for it. But there we go. This is now producing water vapor, and water vapor is starting to build up. Oh, you know what? I could probably just go ahead and get rid of this aluminum here, and I can just add sulfur into our aluminum setup. I think that might be a good idea. And after simply doing this, yes, we're going to be producing a lot of sulfur. And there we go. Nice. So now that we have our sulfur set up, I do need to make sure that our item config is set up right. And I did not currently set that up. We got to make sure the input is turned on here. And there we go. This is going to be slow for right now, and I don't have power on anything, but we will be able to see our sulfuric acid building right here. And that's where we might want to now store sulfuric acid inside of a new chemical card. So with a new card, we can go ahead and set this to sulfuric acid, which is ultimately what we want to produce. And now that we have a place for our sulfuric acid to go, we can then use an interface, and we can just let the machine automatically send the sulfuric acid out of the machine and straight into this interface through the back. Now let's go ahead and, before we put this on here, make sure that the sulfuric acid channel is set up. And so on our chemical, we want to make sure that the back is set to output, just like that. And auto eject is on. And if I can attach this correctly, there we go. I think shift, there we go. Perfect. There we go. You can now see the sulfuric acid is inside here, and it should, before long, end up inside the cell. Now, for the purposes of this video, I do want to make sure and use some muffler cards on here. I do like the sounds of this, but not as we continue on. Now, this next step is going to involve making uranium oxide, and we need to drag uranium into an enrichment chamber, and this uranium is then going to be converted into a yellow cake uranium. And then we need to pipe that yellow cake uranium just basically over here. So just making sure that the config is set up to output to the side, and we can go ahead and make sure that's auto outputting. And then we'll use a logistical transporter to send it into our chemical oxidizer. Now on the chemical oxidizer, everything here is basically fine except for our chemical. We want to make sure to auto output to the back, and this is another place where we are going to have another cell configured. And what this is going to produce is that uranium oxide. And so to keep with that scalability, here we go by putting a interface on the back and allowing the machine to automatically send in, and then getting both of these set up. This should start sending our items into the back. Oh, that's right. We probably need to tell it it can accept items into the back. So input and then auto output, just like that. Now this right here is another setup that is going to need to be scaled up, and usually three to six of these down the road is enough to keep a nice amount of fissile fuel being produced. But just to show you that this is scalable, again, you can just stack the machine on top of the other and just add more export buses, and you will have plenty of channels to keep up. So now we're on to the final step, which is making the fissile fuel itself, which is combining this side and this side together to produce that fissile fuel. So we start with our chemical dissolution chamber. Now inside of this config, we want to make sure that our items are set to the back. I'm going to go ahead and clear this out. This is just for the item config, and we'll say input from the back. Then we go into the chemicals. Now chemicals by default is already set up, nothing do we have to worry about, and auto eject is on, which is exactly what we want to see. And because we are going to be sending everything to the back, that's why I configured it the way we were. And this is where we can send two separate things, right? We can send chemicals through our AE and items through our AE. This is really, really cool. And this makes this nice and compact. So we are going to be sending our sulfuric acid first into this machine, and then we also need to keep fluorite flowed in here as well, which is another material that we're going to have to worry about out of the 3 total materials that we're going to have to worry about externally to keep this running. So we can set this as well to scheduling mode, so that way it makes sure it keeps things round robining. And this is now technically set up. Now moving into the chemical infuser, all we have to do for this is just make sure that the chemical input is on the left and everything else should be fine. And we need to make sure though that we can send another chemical to the back. So this is accepting the red input, and we want to make sure that we turn this to the output, sending to the next machine. And then we want to make sure that the back is where we're going to be inputting our other chemical. And so we'll make sure that's input 2. And this is actually where we're going to be sending the uranium oxide that we're producing over here. So with just those simple setups and simple configs, there we go. We just need to drag uranium oxide straight out of our applied energetic system into this setup, and we are almost done, because this is where the isotropic centrifuge comes into play. So on the config for this, we just want to make sure our chemical is accepted right here. And then we want to make sure that we have our chemicals output, and the output is actually going to be set to the back of the machine, which I want automatically ejecting to. And what are we going to be injecting to? Yes, another chemical storage cell. I do want fissile fuel being stored inside my applied energetic system. So if we take ourselves a chemical cell over here, I can just drag this in, and we now have it locked in, ready to go, ready to have an interface, and allowing all of these machines to just simply run off of these few cards. So we can almost sigh a fresh breath of relief having this all done by just attaching my cables in and slapping on some gates. Now I could power this, of course, from the cables themselves, but I don't know. It doesn't look bad having this all put together like this. Then yeah, slapping some of these muffler upgrades on there. Thankfully, it only takes 1 now to fully silence the machines, and perfect. I'll probably end up unsilencing them in the future. I don't know. But for right now, this is taking that uranium hexafluoride and converting it into fissile fuel, which we can now see starting to build up. Now, what's going to really make this start to run fast is by putting acceleration cards inside of our exporters, and also making sure that we have all the upgrades inside of all of these machines. Now, there is one machine that you definitely don't want to forget upgrading, and that is the chemical dissolution chamber. And you want to make sure to put a chemical upgrade in this, as this is really going to save on the amount of sulfuric acid you're going to be consuming in this process. But yep, we just need to go through and simply upgrade all of these machines. Now, when scaling up your machines, for example, if I want to add more chemical oxidizers, let's just say I have 3 here that I want to add, and I want to add 3 more over here. Well, we can copy the settings from one of our bottom machines by control or shift right clicking, and then we can just simply right click, and it's going to automatically copy those settings and paste them into these machines, making the scalability for this so much easier. And like I said, we just need to add the new pipes just like so, and then make sure we have the items going in correctly. We can either use an export bus or an interface technically if we have even more machines. Now for this setup right here, as much as I would love to just use these logistical transporters, they don't really work so well when trying to separate their locations that they're going to. So an item pipe honestly might be one of the best options in this case. So I can go ahead and set this to pull just like everything else. But whenever I put even a diamond upgrade in here, we can distribute this round robin, which is going to make this so much better than using the logistical transporter pipes. So now for me to keep this up and running, I'm going to probably need a lot more seeds, specifically for uranium, and also making sure I'm keeping it up for sulfur and definitely for fluoride as well. So now to keep everything kind of off my main grid, to keep all of my important things powered, I'm going to move this to channel 2. And remember, we have 4 separate channels that we can mess with, each having a 2 million power transfer rate that is going on up here. So yeah, I'm switching everything to channel 2, making sure this is not consuming off of the main grid. It is going to be consuming, however, off of our main system, and this is kind of a problem that I'm going to be experiencing. I don't have enough power, and I'm not producing, I don't think, enough to technically fully sustain this. This machine right here needs hundreds of thousands of FE to really optimally run. But with this transfer rate of basically giving it 200,000 and limiting that to 200,000 FE per tick, we're producing about 1.5 millibuckets per tick of fissile fuel, which is really, really good, honestly. As a really nice fissile fuel burning rate, I mean, 180 is really, really good. So honestly, I might just keep it where it's at. But now you can definitely see this is costing me a lot of power, and actually more power than I'm currently producing. And thankfully we can see our total power system from within our AE system, and you can notice that this number is falling, and we can see the actual number right here at about 1.3 million a second. We are losing power. Thankfully, though, we do have that huge buffer of power that has been storing up, so it will give me hopefully enough time to get that fission reactor up and start making a turbine, which will easily make back all of that power. But that, my friends, will have to wait till another episode, because today we are definitely all out of time. And I hope you learned something new today. Hopefully you learned how to set up fissile fuel or how to set up those HDPE sheets, and I hope that my approach fits in your own world. And definitely let me know down in the comments if there is a better way of going about and doing this. I would love to hear from you down in the comments, because I've done it a ton of different ways and I learn from you guys. So of course, let me know down in the comments below. And well, guys, I of course look forward to seeing you in the next one. So be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Give this video a huge thumbs up. And well, with that, it's now time to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that huge thanks is going to go to none other than Saxo Kaylee. Thank you so much, by the way, for your amazing support and choosing to support me over on the Discord by becoming a Discord premium member and supporting in one of the best ways possible. Guys, I look forward to, of course, seeing you in the next one. And as always, thanks for watching.